All right, episode 11.
Hey, Carl, how you doing, man?
Good. From sunny
Good.
Orlando. Mickey Mouse and I are hanging out in that Orlando with Dave Ramsey and some good leaders. So life is
All
good.
right. All right. Well, you're there with a good conference.
I do miss my setup though. I didn't realize how much I like my microphone and my big screen Mac and my headphones. So I'm improvising, but I think we'll get through it.
Well, we'll try not to kill too much of your time there, since you're there trying to do some serious work and serious self improvement. I don't want you to have to go to bed too late tonight. I keep forgetting that you are an hour
I'm on
ahead of me
Eastern.
time wise too.
I'm on
Right?
I'm on Eastern time tonight. So we're on the same time,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
No, because we don't do.
But you haven't switched. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're usually on the
Yeah.
same. Yeah. I
Right.
wish we would do
Right.
away with it too, but that's a different,
So yeah.
maybe another podcast on why we can't figure out how to get our clocks worked out.
Well, listen, I wanted to throw something at you tonight, and it's this will be the first, or probably what might be several podcasts that we might do consecutively on this. I have a real concern as a citizen of the United States that the one real bit of power that I have. I mean, I don't care who we are, I don't care how much money we've got. We don't have a lot of power as individual citizens, as part of the 300 and whatever it is, 71 million that now reside in the US. But one thing that I've always felt was sort of my superpower, along with everyone else, is my vote. And I have some concerns that that power is being usurped by political parties and by manipulation of the system. And there's a lot of things going on right now that can cause the average person out there to throw up their hands and say, "Who cares anymore? It doesn't make any difference." And one of the issues that we're dealing with right now, it's when I see political parties or institutions within the government. I'll use the term manipulate the process for their own ends to meet their own agendas without really giving any consideration to whether or not it's representative of what the people desire. And the first thing is something that it's been in the news. This is an appropriate time for us to talk about it, and that's congressional redistricting and the whole concept of gerrymandering. And I know you've done some research on this. I remember the first time I ever heard this term, and it was actually in high school. I doubt this is taught in high school anymore. And I was aware that this is not anything new. This goes back to 1812, when a governor of the state of Massachusetts was pressured by his party, which was interesting. It was the Democrat Republican Party against the Federalists.
Which I think is kind of what it is right now. I think the Democratic Republic Party, if they would just combine and be one because they're close enough to it, and we create a new one, that'd be awesome. I agree. I like that.
You might be right. And he was under pressure to redraw the district in favor of his incumbent party to protect them from gains that were being made by the Federalists. And evidently, I guess the new district looked like a salamander, looked like a
I
lizard, and his
understand.
name
Yeah.
was Jerry, so that's where we got gerrymandering. He ended up being
Elbridge Jerry. So yeah.
yeah, he ended up being Madison's vice president, didn't he?
Yeah.
If I'm not
Yeah. I think
mistaken.
so.
So this is not anything new.
And that was
And
in
I don't,
1812. So that's how
yeah,
long it's been going on. It started, I mean, if we go 1776, it didn't take very long for us to get,
no,
and I think that's an interesting point. You and I have talked about it, and corruption and all that. But it started in 1776, and by 1812, they were having the
yeah,
exact same discussion we're having 250 years after the founding. So I think that's
yeah,
interesting.
where it seems like almost from the very beginning, from the jump, it seems like we're always finding a way to play the system. And it's been in existence from a political standpoint forever. This is not a partisan issue, meaning it's not just a Democrat issue, it's not just a Republican issue. I am so tired of hearing the Democrats say, well, the Republicans did it, and that's why we're doing it. And the Republicans saying, well, the Democrats did it, and that's why we're doing it. I'm sorry. I was
They're
told
both
by my
right,
dad.
actually.
Yeah. And I was told by my dad growing up, just because somebody else did it does not give you the right to do it yourself. So tell me what is your thought? We know that since you've looked into the history, you know that that redistricting originally by our framers of our Constitution was to occur every 10 years during the census, and it was to accommodate the changes in population because of the way we elect our representatives in the House of Representatives. And then all of a sudden, we started having the courts, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was court cases and court issues that started creating these redistricting that was happening in the middle of
Yes.
a census, and some even right at the very beginning, others at the very end, challenges to the validity of the census, all those kinds of things that we can all do to try to play the system in our way. But it was never intended to be used to give a particular political advantage to a particular party. Now, we got the Voting Rights Act that came in and seemed to indicate that we could draw up districts that were geared to strengthening certain racial groups, certain ethnic groups, which, by the way, I'll tell you right up front, I totally disagree with. That was never the intent. If you're going to do that to strengthen a particular race, then you ought to be able to strengthen any race or any ethnic group if you choose. That really was not the intention. But I am so confused now as to even when you can do it, why you can do it, how you can do it. And it's obvious why it is being done. And it hasn't got anything to do with race. It has a whole heck of a lot to do with either overturning a congressional seat or holding on to a congressional seat. So enlighten me, man. Am I off base? Is everything really okay? And
No.
we can just keep doing this? I don't know.
No,
I'm at
I don't think
loss.
so, and I was very confused like you. It's a big headline, Alabama, Virginia. I mean, the state I live in Virginia became the Democratic side, the Republicans were doing in Alabama. So well timed. Thank you for picking this one out because it forced me to go educate myself. Like many other times when I seek to educate myself, I think I get dumber and have more questions. Anyway, I'll muddle through some of my thoughts. And I think it's important to understand why we even have this system. Why is it this way? You know, the founders set out to create a system where the states held the power. That really is the fundamental part of it
Right,
because a lot of people said, oh, we
right,
should federalize elections. I'm completely against that. I do think there should be some federal standards, maybe, of what should
right.
be expected on voting machines and other things. But I think that even gets to be a slippery slope. I'm a states' rights person. That's another podcast for
Mhm.
another time we're going to talk about. But I think
Right.
the federation of the states is very important. So to just up front, you know, kind of full stop, the states control the elections. That's the way it was designed. I think that's part of the beauty of the country. That is what the federation of states brings you. Along with that comes a lot of issues. And I think you know, under that constitutional convention, that was the intent. And the federal government has, in those days, that Bob and I were actually talking about this the other day, the federal government really should have one or two things it's doing. So all the
Right.
departments and EPA,
Agreed.
all the other
Agreed.
things, that was not part of the original intent, and it's only created a larger, more powerful federal government. So all the people are saying, oh, the federal government should take over elections. I don't agree. But again, now that leaves us where we are. We got inconsistencies from states, as you articulated, on timing. What you said is exactly what I found. It was supposed to be every 10 years, and then it gets out of whack because court cases get involved. And now it just appears when people want to redo it, they can. I don't think there's, because it was never a written rule that it was every decade. And then it got wonky. And now it's, you know, if Trump says Indiana should and Alabama thinks they should because of another case, that's
Well,
kind of
my
what's,
understanding is that some states have created state law which restricts them to every 10 years. But I think you're right. From what I understand, the states can do whatever they want. If they
yeah, and I
wanted to
think one,
redistrict every other year, they could.
yeah, the one thing that really I think brought this to the forefront, and it was the first action, and then it's brought all this follow-on action in other states because of this, the Virginia courts and the other pieces, the Virginia one. And when I look at that one, I spent quite a bit of time looking at that one when it happened, and I went back. And if you look at the general election in 2024, and you look at how they voted across that state, it was damn near with Trump and Kamala. And so that tells you that state is pretty split 50-50. That's the way the congressional districts were drawn. It was pretty much 50-50. And
And
under
that
the
has been true,
Democrats,
by the way. That's been true, Cole, for a number of years. I used to
yes.
live in Richmond, Virginia,
Yeah,
and that
it's
was
been a very
30 years
consistent.
ago, and it was a very consistent, almost 50-50 split.
And so when you
Yeah.
look at the demographics and you look at how it's voting, and we're going to talk about the electoral college in a couple more episodes, and I think you and I've got differing opinions on that. We'll see how that goes. But if you just look at the popular vote in Virginia and the 2024, it was very close to 50-50, which tells you that state is very close to 50-50, which tells you if you're in a representative republic, which we are, the representation based on congressional districts and how they're drawn should result in something that looks close to 50-50. That seems, without having to be a constitutional scholar, that seems very logical to me, just using logic. And that's the way it was. And as you said, that's the way it has been. And then the Democrats go redraw it. And it was going to be, my understanding, it was like 9-1 is what the proposed redistricting was going to look like. Again, not a Republican or Democratic issue. To me, looking at it completely unbiased, if it were 9-1 Republican, 9-1 Democrat, I don't care. That's not right. That no longer, I don't know what shape it was, but the Babylon Bee is so good, I started to pull it up. But that was one thing too far for me. But they had the best meme on it, and it showed Virginia, and it said the new congressional districting, and it had like a little bitty thin line and went all over the West Coast, and it included California. So I'm like, that's pretty good. It feels like that's kind of what they did. So again, that's what really got me interested. And then you came up with this and said, hey, let's do this. I thought it was great, and the timing's good. And so thankfully, because again, I don't care. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I'm kind of a homeless political figure, but anytime I see something slanting too far either way, I don't like it. I'm an independent moderate who's probably voted almost Republican and very little Democrat. But if I thought that was a good Democrat, I'd vote for that. I'm a moderate. I'm a centrist. I don't think there's many candidates on either side that are. And I think either side that's swaying it, where in California's done it, Elon articulated it very well, what you would end up with in the United States with redistricting based on. And the other problem is the census is including in some states people who are not citizens, and they're putting that in their congressional districts. And so if you pay people to come in the United States and you give them free stuff, how do you think that's going to work out, especially when you start redrawing the districts? And Elon articulated that very well the night before the election on Rogan's podcast. Of what you could do is you don't have to change everything. You have to change a handful of swing states, and the playbook's already been put out in California. California was not an all Democratic state, and now it's a uniparty state. There aren't two parties in the state of California, and it was not that way. They didn't change the people's minds. They simply changed the electorate. And I don't like that. Again, I don't like that either way. I think something close to 50-50 is healthy for this nation. And I think having a Democrat president for a while is good, and a Republican president for a while, and keep doing that and don't oscillate too far. All of the problems with it, I still like our system better than anything else. I think it's great. It's genius. It's the best form of self-government, the best experiment that's ever been done. I think the problem is, like anything else, when systems get bastardized, that's a problem. And we've talked about this before. The branches of government get all out of whack. Congress is not using the power of the purse, and the executive branch takes too much, and then the courts get involved. This is the same thing. People are messing with it. But back to your very original question of, the beauty of this country versus many others is our vote matters, and it should matter. And I think we're going to focus on this, but we could do this for a long time, because there's things that worry me a lot. This one worries me because of how it's being done. But it really would be easy for people to get disenfranchised, because social media, the Hunter Biden laptop got suppressed by intel agencies and all this stuff, which came out and said later it would have affected 40% of that vote. 40% of the people that said they voted for him, if they'd have known some of that, it would have changed information. That got suppressed by government agencies. So social media, the censorship, all the things that are going on, I think we're in a fragile time, and technology is not making it better necessarily, where people get really disenfranchised and really think my vote doesn't matter, and I'm not even going to vote anymore. I don't care.
Right.
And I think that's really bad. Ironically, my Uber back from dinner was a Venezuelan gentleman. What a timely discussion. Talking to a guy who moved here from Venezuela 10 years ago to play baseball in the United States. Very, very intriguing what he thinks about what's going on here. We basically ended it with, no matter how bad things are in this country right now, it's a hell of a lot better than where he came from. And
True.
He said that his desire as a Venezuelan is that Venezuela would become a 51st state of the United States. He said that would be better than anything they would possibly come up with. I said, well, you never know. Hang on. It might be the 50th or 53rd. Trump's trying to get a few right now. He's got a few he's trying to get, so we'll see. But
it's got to get in line behind Greenland's, but
Greenland, Cuba, and there's a few that
Greenland,
we're working.
Canada.
Yeah, we may have 55 2028. But I love this country. I think it's interesting how people that come here love it. And I think it's a real issue to figure this out again. And it's similar to what we talked about with the educational system. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh my gosh, congressional redistricting, representative republic sucks. What do we do? I think, and I thought about this as I was talking to him driving back, and I had made a lot of notes, and I've kind of changed my thought process on it, because the thing you want to get to in a lot of this is you need some entity that's kind of above the fray, beyond reproach, that can be independent of all this and look at it and say, here's how we do it. Because the problem is when old Jerry drew the salamander, he had maps and pencils, and it wasn't as much of a science as it is today. I mean, today you have the data and you have the information to make it where if you're in control, you make it where the other party never wins, and you can ensure that. And I didn't even know terms like, what is it, packing and cracking, and
Right.
cracking
Right.
is cracking a district, and you can move the majority around. Packing is there's so many strategies around it. And then you throw that along with all the tools that are available. It's tough. So, and it's funny, AI, and there's been a lot of talk of AI at this conference. You almost want an unbiased AI to look at it and district the state based on data, and look at it and tell the AI to come out with, as close as you can, an unbiased 50-50, or whatever the demographic of the popular vote of that state is, and you want to match the congressional lines to represent that.
Well,
That seems like an easy thing for AI to fix.
I don't know if you noted when you're doing your research what many states have done. Arizona, the most recent, where they have created an independent commission that does their congressional redistricting. Each party, the Democrats select two representatives that are Democrats, the Republicans select two representatives that are Republicans. The four of them decide on a fifth individual, and those five do the redistricting. And there are other states that have done that to try to take some of the partisanship. And even if you're a state that is 97% Republican, you're still going to have an even number of Democrats and Republicans on the congressional redistricting side.
Yeah, I
You
saw that, and I
mentioned,
think it's got to be something independent like that. I'm joking about the AI partially because you still have bias, but I think in the spirit of equal representation in this country, I like what Arizona's done. That was the best model I've seen to attempt to get to something. And again, like you said, it doesn't matter because states change. I think it's got to be equal representation from both sides, and it's got to be willing to look at it and say, what is our state made up of? And again, that changes as people move around. I mean, the demographics since 2020 in this country have changed dramatically. I mean, Texas has lost a ton of population. It's changing. Florida, Tennessee, Texas, Alabama are changing. So the move east and south has changed a lot in what the
right,
congressional districts look like.
right,
And it'll
right.
change again, but I think it's got to be something independent like that. And I don't think our system doesn't work. I think it's the execution of our system has been bastardized and hijacked by very partisan people.
No, you're
By the way,
absolutely right.
we're working on product placement. So Michelob Ultra, if they want to kick in money, we'll take it. So
Okay. Or Texas Tech, if you want to know who to pull for in the CFP this year. You mentioned, and you and I've talked about this at great length, that you're very much a states' rights person. And I think I am too. As a matter of fact, as we get further into future podcasts along this line, you may find I'm even more states. I'm not quite a Confederate, but I really believe in states' rights. However, and this is just something to consider, when it comes to the House of Representatives, which, at least in theory, controls the purse strings of the country if the system works as it should. When you leave to the states the policing and the regulation of how they are going to divide their or create their congressional districts, it makes it so that it can become so highly politicized. And you're talking about a body in the House of Representatives, Senate as well, but here we're talking about the House of Representatives. The decisions that they make affect all of us. And so, for that reason alone, I'm willing to say that the rules regarding congressional redistricting should be under federal regulation. The federal government should establish the rules and make sure they're followed by the states. Now, how, from that point forward, when and then here's some suggestions that I have, and I may be all wet, but I have been accused. In fact, I have gotten some feedback from some of our podcasts in which friends of mine and some not so friendly individuals that know me have really appreciated our perspective, but I have been told on a number of occasions, you're oversimplifying it. Well, yeah, I think most of what is important to be done in terms of how we run this country should be done simply. We have purposely, I believe, overcomplicated it because it makes it a whole lot easier to manipulate it when you make it extremely complex. And that's when you can say, well, there shouldn't be any regulations regarding there shouldn't be term limits because man, you have to serve 16 years before you even understand how things work. Well, that's because things aren't working correctly. It should not
That's how
take that.
we
But
we end up too saying you don't need an ID to vote because people can't get IDs to vote, and
right.
it's
Right.
pretty
And you know
simple.
what?
Yeah, you have an ID for
Let me tell
everything
you what
else.
happens. Let me tell you what happens in Ecuador. Number one, you must vote if you're under the age of 65. And if you don't, you are fined what is a tremendous amount of money for an Ecuadorian. But guess what? You have to show up and you show up with your cedula and they check you in. And so you will vote and you will go there and vote. And they will provide transportation if you're elderly. Although if you're over 65, and you can't make it, they'll let you slide. But if you need transportation, they'll provide it. But so yes, that can be done. Here's what
If
I
you're
was going.
dead here, they'll provide transportation. You can vote. So
Oh, that's true.
three
And
times,
in fact,
three times.
yeah, several times. So anyway, here's some things that I would suggest that seem like an oversimplification. Maybe they are. You tell me. We know that by law, all congressional districts are supposed to be approximately the same size, and that's across the nation. Okay. And so that's why in California or New York or in Texas or Florida, you have a lot of congressional districts. In Nebraska, you've got three, that sort of thing. And that's fine, but it still is based on census and it is determined, okay, within a few voters or, within a congressional district, this is the size the district is supposed to be. Okay. In my opinion, I mean, that shouldn't change. That remains the same. Redistricting should only occur every 10 years. And forget this, well, the courts have decided you need to restructure this and this sort of thing, because I don't trust the courts these days. They are so highly politicized, as are judges, and it swings both ways. So I would say this, that redistricting outside of that 10-year framework, okay, should never occur unless it is by court order, and it has to be based on a violation of federal law. If there's a federal law that has been violated and it impacts the districting, then I could see them trying to make a correction. But I have a problem anytime that we, as much as I love states' rights, anytime that we have a decision within a state that favors one party over another or one racial or ethnic group over another that can impact congressional decision making, I think federal law has got to prevail there. And so that's why I would do that. I think, and you were talking about how do you grow this, and here's where AI could help us. I'm in complete agreement with you here. Redistricting, in my opinion, should be done by either expanding or contracting the size of the districts, depending on what has happened with population. And I think that the districts should be added organically, not gerrymandering to protect incumbents or to alter political strength or to guarantee political strength for a particular ethnic or racial group. And I think that as much as possible, the congressional district should resemble perfect squares of different sizes. It shouldn't run all the way from the northern part of Alabama to the southern part of Alabama and only be a half-mile wide. That makes absolutely no sense. And that tells me somebody is trying to manipulate the process here. There is no reason why, if you're out in a part of Alabama that has less population, guess what? It's going to be a bigger square, because it's still going to end up with the same number of people in that congressional district as you're going to have down around Birmingham. You can say that's an oversimplification. Yeah, because the answer is simple. And
Yeah,
it should cross socioeconomic and racial divides. That should not matter.
no, it should be a
And
colorblind, socioeconomic, blind. All that should
right,
not matter. And I hear what your friend or feedback person's saying, but I fully agree. most oftentimes the best solution to a problem is the most simple solution. It's an excuse to say something's too
Occam's
complicated.
razor.
Occam's razor is 100% accurate. I love that, and I think it's fully accurate, especially when things are complicated. Generally, the best solution is the most simple. And I think it's merely an excuse to say that things are too complicated. Then it's like, well, it's so hard we can never fix it, so we just won't. We'll keep screwing it. I don't ever accept that. I do think, and I agree with you. I think two things. I think if you limited the scope and the size of the federal government,
Mm-hmm.
then the implications of this even become a little less, because some of the things that are doing through congressional representation, it's not as much stuff. But I think kind of three things that I had in the solutions bucket, and you've already hit on them. But the independent redistricting commissions, to me, that's top priority. I think that has to happen. I think right under that is national standards. And here's something I thought of just while we were talking. It's not part of my notes at all, but I think independent commissions, national standards that are adhered to. And again, that can be voted on. That doesn't have to be any one state comes up with that. It doesn't have to be Congress comes up with it. We can figure out how to adopt that. That could be a constitutional amendment. I mean, we can go figure it out. There's a lot of ways to do things. I do think the role that AI could play to make it very independent, or just an algorithm, doesn't necessarily have to be AI. I like your square. It could be whatever shape, but I think it's a concentric, large, small thing that captures more or less geography. That is where some algorithm AI based solution could really help you grab. So you take this population of people, here's the population density fed in by the census. Within 32 seconds, I promise you, AI models could come out and say,
Yeah.
here's the districts and how they could look. And I do
Yeah,
think
because all it is a matter of taking your state's population
it's just data.
and
It's just manipulating data.
the federal government's population figures in which they establish these are to be the population sizes of your congressional districts, and then you just do them. Let AI do the math and draw the picture.
And as long as you do it that way, it's going to work out where, yeah, there may be 4 districts in Birmingham and Huntsville that, whatever the numbers are, however it works out, where they're more liberal and you got other ones that are conservative. But again, it will capture all that, will be normalized. It won't matter.
Right.
It's when you
Right.
start trying to,
Right.
which again, it's what politics has become in this country, is you have to bend everybody out into a box. And because you're black or white or Asian or liberal or conservative or whatever, that's the problem, is they're trying to manipulate all those boxes of people. It's not supposed to be that way. And here's the thing I think that would be intriguing if we're going to redesign the system some. Maybe because when this was done, and it was 10 years, it was a long time ago. People were traveling by horse and buggy, and population was not as transient. You had, generally, people stayed within a smaller radius. And because people do move from California to Texas to Florida, from New York to Nevada, whatever, people move quick. The frequency, again, if you set the independent commission of doing it, you have national standards, and you're using an easy thing to come up with how the districts are done, hell, it could be done every year. I don't think it needs to be
Yeah.
done every year, but you could.
Right. Right.
10 years seems honestly like too long now, because 10 years, goodness
And it
gracious,
may
it
be.
hasn't
It may be.
it
Maybe it should
hasn't
go to
been 10
5.
years since COVID hit. And so the world's changed a lot. So maybe it's 3, maybe it's 5. I think the time is irrelevant. I think 10 years is too long, because I think things are changing, and I think that could get a little
Well,
wonky.
that's 5 congressional terms,
That's right.
you
And
know,
so,
and
it make it 4 years, and
maybe
then you
it's
got 2
6
congressional terms. Maybe it's
yeah.
6. I think 5 feels better than 10. I think 2 or 3 is too frequent, but somewhere in the 5, because I just look at how much the world and our country is changing in 5 years. It was only 2021 5 years ago, and man, oh me, a lot's changed since 2021, especially with population, the transient nature of who's moved around. But again, I think the time frame becomes irrelevant and easier if you do kind of the other three things we're saying, of having an independent commission, some national standards, and some algorithm to create the boxes. It's not a heavy lift at that point. It's just simply the census is the problem. So you would have to look at it, but the census shouldn't be as freaking hard as it is either. So do that every 5 years
Not
should
anymore,
not be
no.
that hard. It's just
It's
not
all
hard.
being done, virtually all of it's being done online, so, and I know people get missed and all that kind of stuff, but, they got missed when you had to knock on doors and
Well,
they
if you
refused to come to
here's
the door.
here's a radical idea. If you do elections like, people who don't have the things that we have and the ability to do things like Ecuador, what if every time people showed up to vote congressionally, every 2 years, you could redo the census, just make everybody vote, and you could get a lot of it then. And then
That's
the
true.
outliers of the people
That's
that
true.
didn't vote, you go figure out how to get that. I mean, there's so many ways to get the census to be quicker than what it takes to do that right now. So.
Well, there's another option that could be considered, and it's radically different. And I'm not suggesting it's the way we should go, but for those of us that are big fans of states' rights, you could just say, let the states do whatever they want. And if Alabama or Louisiana or Texas wants to rig their systems so that only Republicans are going to be sent to Congress, eventually they'll pay the piper on that. And they need to bear in mind that if you were to do that, I mean, we could do that and say, hey, it's not the federal government's business. That is Texas's representatives. That's California's representatives. That's New York's representatives. So you could lock in California for the Democrats and New York and Connecticut and places like that uh, for the Democrats, and Texas and Florida and Oklahoma and whatever for the Republican Party, and probably manipulated in such a way within those states that unless there was some massive change in the makeup of your population, you'd end up with almost the same votes coming across and the same congressional makeup. And it would take something really unusual to offset that. I don't think that's the answer. That's a states' rights answer, though. State could say, hey, if I want to
Yeah.
refigure my congressional district every other year, I can do it. Because right now there's nothing constitutionally that restricts states from doing that. And so I don't think that's a direction to go, but certainly there are those who could take that stance.
Yeah,
And
and again, you and I are very similar on the states' rights thing, and I end up talking out of both sides of my mouth. But in a representative republic, man, I just feel like it should be representative of the people of those districts. And when you don't do that, I mean, in Virginia, I think, and it's funny that Democrats make me laugh sometimes. Barack Obama was really good at trying to boil the frog. He was a little quieter about things. Some of the Democrats now, they try to chuck frogs in water that's already boiling,
mhm.
and it doesn't seem to go well, which I love. I'm a fan of, do what you're doing. Mamdani in New York City. Let's just see how a socialist communist does over the next 4 years, and that's good advertisement. It'll either be great and we'll all do it, or it'll suck and we'll figure that out. So sometimes I'm a fan of just let them eat cake and 3 meals a day and see how it works out. And I think that's what happened in Virginia. They got so radical with it that it blew up, and nobody liked the fact that you're going from a 5 to 5, 6 to 4, whatever it was, to a 9 to 1. Yeah, so I don't know what my feeling is on that, because I don't love the states being able to manipulate things and screw with it. It's a representative republic, and again, maybe Dad does need to step in and smack the states around a little bit sometimes and say, no, here's the standard, because otherwise you are at risk of a lot of people who
Yeah,
become very disenfranchised with the system. And if
and if
Virginia
the
became a Democratic all the time, that people there are just going to give up.
if congressional decisions were being primarily made by congressmen and women from Texas and Florida and Louisiana, I'm not sure I would like that either, because it does impact me, okay? Or it impacts our nation's spending anyway, to a
Yes.
certain extent. Maybe it doesn't impact me. I don't know. Eventually, I got to pay taxes to pay for whatever it is they've decided to spend. But
I
when you're
just think
talking
the
about those
overall
things,
direction of the country, and again, we've talked about this, but the nature of what the federal government's doing, they're overreaching. Again, that's a three
absolutely.
part podcast for a different thing, but giving us where we are currently, they decide a lot of the direction of where we're going, and what that's going to look like from a taxation, a lot of policy, military spending. There's so many things that they come up with that you're right. Alabama, Texas, Florida, they start deciding what the other states want. Then you got 5 states that are deciding what's good for everybody, and that's a little bit of a prelude to the electoral college, as you end up with too few people
Yeah,
deciding what's best
absolutely.
for
You're
everybody.
kind of, in fact, that may be a direction we need to look at next week, because it does impact certain things such as states' rights. And I think the question that we'll ask, and we won't get into it now, is, has the electoral college outlived its usefulness? Given the mobility factor, the fact that it doesn't matter where you live, you can conduct business across state lines, is the protection of the opinions of Wyoming that critical? I mean, I don't want to get into that right now, but those are things that once again cause frustration on the part of the voters, who
Yeah, it's
say,
close and
every year they identify 4 states, and the entire election is going to hinge on these 4 states in the Midwest. And after a while, people in Nevada start saying, I don't care. I'll go to the casino. Thank you very much. I don't need to vote
It
because
does
it's all going
change
to be
though. And
determined by Michigan and
Alabama,
Wisconsin. And
it changes though. I mean, Alabama for many years was completely irrelevant. And all of a sudden in 2016, all the candidates came. You know, as things move, timing of when elections are, when you're looking at some of the primaries, some
well,
of that
think of
stuff changes
Georgia.
a little bit.
Think of Georgia. And I do realize, yes, it can change based on, especially if it's very tight. And regardless of what the president may say or what Biden might have said or Obama might have said, the last several elections have been very tight from an
Yeah.
electoral college standpoint.
Yeah. Well, I
And
think the thing with this, and you know, looking at the congressional representative, the true unique difference in our country and many other forms of government is it, and people don't even understand what our government is. It's not a democracy. It's a representative republic, which is drastically different than a pure democracy. And that's where the popular vote, you know, you start having issues with that. Even this thing, because the core of who we are is a representative republic. That's why, to me, these congressional districts being accurate is so important, because that is the foundation, ground zero level DNA of what our government is based on. And
right,
when you screw that
right,
up, then it's kind of like we've talked about before. Our government is based on, and the Declaration of Independence, it's inalienable rights, God-given rights. Well, if you take God out of inalienable God-given rights, then men start think they're giving people their rights. Our rights don't come from man; they come from God. We'll take God out of our government. That's what it was founded upon. Like it or not, it just is what it is. To me, same thing with the representative republic. If we start taking out the representation and gerrymandering and screwing around with how the representation is done in a false sense, then our government, it's a lost cause at that point. We might as well decide the new form of government we're going to have, because that is the basis of it. But to me, that's why
well, let
this
me
is
tell you,
such an important argument.
you've heard me talk before, and I will continue to ring this bell that the typical American voter is lazy, does not do his or her homework, does not really know what the issues are, listens to 30-second sound bites on advertising, which thank God will be over tomorrow in Alabama. But the what ends up happening, and the reason that the I was always taught coming up through school that the beauty of the House of Representatives was, and the reason there were so many, is they were closer to the individual person on the ground living in those communities. The Senate,
The House of
everybody gets
Commons,
to.
it's built out of, I
Exactly.
mean, it's the
And
House of Commons and the Lords, and it's
but
the Senate versus the,
the reason that we allow the gerrymandering to take place, the reason that it can be successful is because we have far too many people out there, and I would say the vast majority, that will say, I'm a Republican. So it doesn't matter who's running, doesn't matter what they've done or not done. They're Republican, so that's how I'm voting. I'm going to vote straight ticket. Same thing on the Democrat side. I'm a Democrat, or I'm a conservative, which most people cannot define that. I'm a liberal. Most people cannot define that either. But they know what that is supposed to mean. They do not know what the issues are. Most of them don't care what the issues are. A lot of them only want to be on the winning side. They don't care who it is. And if I'm in a state or a district that is predominantly Republican, by golly, I'm going to vote Republican so I can tell all my friends, yeah, I voted for him. Yeah, we won, this sort of thing. And
that's
until
another
we
thing that's
as
always bothered me. You said something about the winning. That bothers me when they start giving exit polling data and early returns and some of that, and the polling. And something, I was not a huge fan of Rush Limbaugh forever, but he said something in the 2016 election. I'll never forget. Cassie and I were talking about it the night before the election, and she and I, neither one liked Hillary. You know, at the time, liked Trump maybe better than I even like him now, but was not a Trump fan during the primary. But she was very worried and thought Hillary was going to win the night before. I said, I don't think so at all. I don't think it's going to be that close. And it really was because of something Rush Limbaugh had said the weeks leading up to it. He was talking about pollsters. Because of what you said, people want to vote for the winning team a lot of times. And so the polls were skewed, and it was very evident in 2016. All the polls had Hillary winning, and it wasn't that close when you were about 3 months out, 4 months out. And Rush said, as you get inside of 6 to 8 weeks, watch what the polls do. It happened in 2016. It happened again just in 2024, where it ends up changing as it gets closer, because the pollsters can't afford to lose all credibility. And if they say that, you know, giving candidates going to lose by 20 and they win by 4, they lose credibility. But those polls, even, there's just not many things that are unbiased at all. The polls project the person they want to win is leading, because that affects a lot of people's votes. And the problem, and the root of what you're saying, and I agree with, is there's a lot of laziness on the part of citizens of the United States in voting. It takes work to go research the candidates and understand. And the thing is, it's easier now than it's ever been, but it takes work. It's easier to access data. There's more data
The
there, is what I'm
data,
saying. It's not necessarily
exactly.
easiver, but there is more data. I mean, I remember when I first started voting, I voted for Ross Perot in my first presidential election, and it turns out he was right. The giant sucking sound, all the things he said was pretty spot on. But back then, you didn't know. I mean, you heard him say a few things. You couldn't go back and even find videos of what they had said. The amount of information to find out what people really think now is widely available. It's harder to go get it, but that takes time and effort. And it is, the guy from Venezuela driving my Uber tonight said, he said, I love this country. I love being here. And the passion is very interesting to me, the passion that immigrants show, because they've come from something worse. A lot of us are here and we take it for granted, and we're not willing to do the work it takes to sustain it.
You mentioned Ross Perot. I remember him fondly. He was hilarious. And I'm not sure that he was the right man at the right time, but, that tugs on my old libertarian heart. I will say that. It's interesting. Here's my last comments on this, and I firmly believe it, that until the American voter gets off of his or her duff, does the work, finds out what the issues are, listens to things critically, gives the other side a chance to at least listen to them, okay, and makes a decision, which right now is not happening, okay, for a variety of reasons. Most of it is laziness. Some of it is, I just want to pick a winner. I don't care who they are. But until we do that, nothing is going to change. And the American voter deserves what they're getting. Sorry, you're getting exactly the government that you deserve. I firmly believe that. And Democrats who are out there right now saying, well, we've got a dictator running this country. Okay, let's assume that's true. Guess whose fault that is? Sorry, Democrats, you didn't do your job. You didn't get your message out. You didn't get your people to the polls. You didn't prove to people why Kamala Harris was a better candidate. So guess what? You got what you deserve. So don't go blaming anyone else on it, for that. And
And I think the
the American
even worse
people,
problem than that is, and this has been a problem I've had forever, is the fact that anybody's calling Donald Trump a dictator doesn't understand what a dictator is. Like him or not, he's not a freaking dictator. He's already left office one time. Putin hasn't left office. Dictators don't leave office. So all that rhetoric, and I think that detracts from it. And I do think, because I was gonna ask the question of how do we fix it, but part of it is the rhetoric, and people get tired. And instead of running on what you're going to do, and I think Trump has really exacerbated this with the Democrats. I used to think, and I don't think this was just me thinking, and I think it was a pretty widely held sentiment. The Democrats, go back Obama era, pre-Trump, were much better strategists at doing exactly what you said, of getting their messaging out, having a concise message. Whether they did it or not, don't care, but they had a tight message, a concise message, and it was what they were going to do. And then Trump comes along, and since 2016, the Democrats have not had a coherent message of what they're going to do. The Republicans didn't. I thought the Republican Party was going to die forever in the Obama years because they couldn't articulate anything. And then Trump comes along and hijacks the party, and he does say what he's going to do, like it or not, whether he has or hadn't, but he has articulated a message, and it was very simple. I don't know that he can articulate it.
I just wish he would keep the message the same instead of changing
No,
it
I
every other day.
don't disagree,
But
but
no, I agree
now
with you
all you
though.
hear out of the Democrats is not him, orange
Well,
man bad.
they can tell you what they hate.
Yeah, and
They can
that's
tell you what they
become
hate.
their
They can't tell you
platform.
anything about, yeah,
And I
they
think a
can't
lot
tell
of
you
what
how they're going
to
to fix
fix
it.
this is, and I don't know how you do this. I don't have the answer, but it sure would be a lot more attractive. And we've joked about it, and maybe we put ourselves up for the 2028 podcast of interviews of presidential candidates. But I would much rather have them spend 3 hours on 10 different podcasts that are quote left, quote right. I'd rather see them be centrist, actually, which I think a lot of them are, that get branded right, especially. Rogan's not a right wing person for sure. Neither are half of his buddies that do podcasts. But let them go on there, and they can waste the time doing whatever they want. If they want to talk about, if it's JD Vance or Marco Rubio, and say they're idiots, that's fine. or you could actually go in there and articulate what you're going to do and what's positive. And I think that would be much more attractive to people. I know so many people that get so sick of it every time there's an election because of all the crap and all the mudslinging. And if some way the voters could hold the candidates accountable, and it really would be rewarding good behavior, is probably how you do it, because they're just, we've talked about this on one of our previous podcasts. We kind of get what we deserve. You just said it. We incentivize the behavior that we are getting. But a large population, a large percentage of the population is becoming very apathetic because it's just maddening and very tiring versus hearing, just give me your message of what you're going to do. I don't care what you think about that person and how bad you think they suck. And maybe you compare and contrast it, and I do think calling a thing, but when you start calling people fascists and Nazis and dictators and whatever, it's not helpful. It's just, what are you doing? What are they doing? How is that different? And put that on the ballot. And I
Well,
think until we get that,
unfortunately,
you're going to have a lot of frustration, a lot of laziness where people won't participate and figure it out, which then allows the problem with that, to me, the biggest danger and what's being shown in all this congressional redistricting is the laziness of the electorate that's allowing this to happen. And the laziness, and I believe a lot of the apathy, is coming from bad candidates and bad campaigns that don't talk about what they're really going to do. And so then the problem is, in the absence of a strong electorate who's holding people accountable, the government and the politicians start doing silly things like what they were doing in Virginia.
well, and at the end of the day, until the American electorate develops an attention span of greater than 30 seconds, we're going to have a problem. Okay. I've been listening because with my network here, I can tune into any local ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox affiliate in the country. So we listen to Alabama. I'm so tired of, I'm 99% with Trump. I'm 100% with Trump. There is no difference in the message. Now, of course, they really, through today anyway, started really bad mouthing the other candidates. And yeah, I think you're right. I think part of it, I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg. I think the voters are tired of it, which is why they only pick up on 2 or 3 words, and they're not going to take the time to listen to a debate, which, by the way, have become pretty silly and
Well, some of these
pointless
some
of
of these
late as
things, and
well.
you just said it well, and it drives me crazy because in some of these elections, the fact that you align 99% with Trump and you're running for a freaking, whether it's a sheriff or a hell city council position, it's like the fact that
Right,
you align with Donald Trump and you're a city councilman, what does that even mean?
right,
It's
right,
again, that's being lazy too. All you're doing is
right.
playing on somebody's popularity or perceived popularity, and I'm on their team. I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do, but man, I side with him and I support him. That's
Yeah.
stupid.
Well, and part of that, though, may be that the candidates have said nobody's going to listen anyway. In Alabama, all they're going to hear is yes, Trump, and then
Yeah,
they'll vote
preying on
for
the
him.
laziness. That's
And
exactly right.
so I don't know which came first, and I don't know how it's going to be corrected. Here is my great fear. Something really tragic is going to happen in the United States.
That's what I was about to say. The
And,
only
and
way
and we
this
haven't
gets
got
fixed, Randy,
we haven't
it does. It only gets fixed through really hard times. It's the hard times create hard men, create easy times, weak men create hard times. The only way all this snaps out, unfortunately, and I'll argue with anybody about it, again, it's not because I'm smart, it's simply history.
right,
People, and it may
right.
take us another 200 years before something tragic happens and we snap out of it. This thing is not tending toward more order. Everything in the world tends toward chaos. It's just the laws of physics. That's what's going to happen with this. And until something bad enough wakes up the generally apathetic population, it's going to keep going down this pathway. And
Well, I
again, I
tell you,
think
my
no matter how much you and I talk about it and others, I think it's fun and I think it works, and I do think it makes a difference. I
right.
think the positive, because
If you can
I'm a
wake
glass
people up,
well, I'm a glass half full kind of guy, so I watch it what happened during the last election and the voices that were able to change. And when you got people, because there were some people that woke up. Silicon Valley has waken up and realized they don't like what's going on, and they were very outspoken. Mark Andreessen is on Rogan again. I can't wait to listen to him. But he talked about, he was a ardent Hillary Clinton supporter, and through some of the experiences he had with that, changed and became very outspoken. I'm very curious to see what he says, because he became an outspoken Trump guy, like a lot of the Silicon Valley tech billionaires did. I'm very curious to see what he says now. My guess is they'll get into it, and my guess is he likes some of the things and doesn't like some of the things. Maybe that is a way, is some very influential people do wake up, and it turns out the rich guys, when it starts affecting their money, they wake up a little bit and they become outspoken. I think, because I like being a glass half full and not we're gonna have to have a civil war before everything changes kind of person. I do think the good news is the fact that you and I are sitting here in Orlando, Florida, and in Ecuador having this conversation. There are conversations going on. There are easier ways for conversations to go on. The word can get out, and maybe more conversations that can happen like this, and especially people that have a lot more listeners than we do. Maybe people can wake up a little bit. I'm always optimistic, and maybe that can be. And we've seen change. I mean, people have spoken up. People have sacrificed a lot to create some change. Protests work, not the ones where you burn down buildings and do bad things, but throughout our history, and I think it's another beautiful part that's only unique to this nation, is we can speak out about our leaders. If we don't like something that Donald Trump's doing, we can say that. If we didn't like something Barack Obama was doing, we could say that. There was danger a little bit, I think, until Elon bought Twitter, if some of the censorship was going on. It feels like that's a little bit better now, and you can speak out. And so I'm a big fan of protest. If you don't like something, there's power in numbers and protest and speaking out. So maybe there is a way through people doing it. I mean, it's happening. I mean, what happened in Virginia was not allowed to happen. People spoke out. The courts got involved. It's just a shame that it's got to get there because it's people seem to be too lazy until something goes really sideways. But
Well, my friends in China would tell you that nation-changing event is going to take place when the world economies switch their backing to the Chinese yuan and away from the dollar, and
well,
that will wake the United States up. That's their goal anyway.
I
And
agree, but something important happened last week, and you'll love this because you're such a Trump fan. And I think I mentioned I saw a video, and then it actually happened. Justin and I were talking about this the other day because the BRIC countries do want the dollar to be gone. They just don't trust each other as much as they hate each other. They don't like us, but they trust us. That's how the dollar really is the fundamental reason the dollar is still the standard currency of the world. It's not any. There's one single reason based on every bit of research I've done. It's because all those countries don't trust each other. They don't like us, but they trust us. But I think there's another thing going on, and oil plays a lot into it. And the Venezuela thing, and then the Iran thing, and something happened that when Trump was in China talking to Xi is committed to start buying American oil. And we have more oil reserves than anybody. And if the world starts turning toward our oil, that will play a significant role in strengthening the dollar again as being the world currency. So whether
and
Trump stumbled into that or what happened, but
Cody
woo,
Campbell will
Texas
love it,
Tech's gonna
and
be
Texas
good.
Tech's
Y'all have four
NIL is going.
quarterbacks. Arch
That's
Manning will
right.
come play for Texas Tech if that happens.
That's right. We'll take him for that 5th year.
That's right.
Oh, well,
That's
listen,
right.
this has been good.
Yeah,
You
love
have
it.
a great time there with the rest of your conference, and
Yeah.
be thinking about the Electoral College, pros and cons, why it exists, should it
I'm going to
change,
challenge
is
myself
everything.
on that because I'm a pretty ardent supporter, but I will challenge myself and listen to your points, and I look forward to it because it's another very relevant thing. I do think it's part of the fabric of how our country was developed. Whether it's still should be there or not, I think that'll be a fun discussion.
Yep. Looking forward to it. Well, listen, you have a
Enjoyed it.
great rest of the week, and I'll talk with you later on. Look forward to next week.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks, brother.
See ya.